Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining the National Sheriff's Association's webinar, Maintaining Morale During a Public Health Crisis. We will try to be mindful of your time today and stick to the 30 minutes that we have allotted for this webinar. With that being said, we won't have time for live Q&A. So please feel free to use the chat box for questions or email me at kbarksdale@sheriffs.com and I will be sure our presenter gets your question. My contact information will be at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. For our introduction today, I will pass it over to Senior Program Specialist from the conference.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Christy, for that introduction. My name is Nazmia Conry. I'm a Senior Program Specialist at the Department of Justice, Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services. I'm also the Program Manager for the Cloud Reform Initiative, and I just welcome you to today's webinar on behalf of the Director of the COPS Office, Bill Keith. Thank you for your service. I hope you get a lot out of this. I encourage you to send emails to Christy so that we can get answers for you from the sheriff, and I look forward to the conversation today. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Laura Wilt with the International Association of Chiefs of Police.
Thank you, Nazmia. Good afternoon. My name is Laura Wilt. I'm a program manager at the IACP. And Chelsea, if you can just advance one slide for us, please. Thank you. And I currently oversee the Collaborative Reform Initiative Technical Assistance Center, shorthand for that's longhand for the shorter name of CRI-TAC. And we are a national training and technical assistance center that brings no-cost training and technical assistance to the field at large. We are partnered with 9 other leading law enforcement associations through this effort. You can see all of those logos here on the slide, but most importantly today, we are partnered in particular with NSA to bring you this incredible webinar. And as we get towards the end of the presentation, there's actually going to be a slide where we encourage those of you who are present to take a bit more time to take a look at CRI-TAC and see how we may be able to service a unique training or technical assistance need that your agency has. What we're bringing you today is a webinar that's part of a bigger effort to pivot during a time of crisis and COVID-19 and share some insights and technical assistance with the field at large. But we also encourage agencies to look into CRI-TAC for unique agency-specific training and technical assistance needs for which we can be of help. And with that, I will turn it over to Christy with NSA.
Thank you, Laura. Next slide, please. I will take one quick minute just to tell you a little bit about NSA. Chartered in 1940, NSA is a professional association dedicated to serving the office of sheriff and its affiliates through education, training, and general law enforcement information resources. NSA provides the resources and advocacy for sheriffs, law enforcement, criminal justice professionals, and their communities. There are currently over 3,000 sheriffs nationwide. Our membership base includes over 13,000 individual members, including sheriffs, deputies, other law enforcement officers, public safety professionals, and concerned citizens. Next slide, please. Our presenter today, Sheriff Garry McFadden, was elected to serve as the 45th Sheriff of Mecklenburg County in December of 2018. Prior to being elected as sheriff, he had a distinguished 36-year law enforcement career with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, where he served for over 20 years as a homicide detective. Sheriff McFadden's unconventional methods and deep ties to the community helped him solve hundreds of murders over the course of his career. And now, as sheriff, he has used his past experience to find new ways to engage his staff in times of crisis, such as COVID-19. And with that, I'll pass it over to Sheriff Garry McFadden.
Well, thank you all so much. I hope everybody can hear me clearly. I will try not to talk so much and go through this very quickly so we won't take up much of your time, but I'm very honored to be a part of this and honored to be a member of just about all the organizations that you just mentioned. When we came into this crisis, I was worried, and I see one of my colleagues on here, Quentin Miller of Asheville, North Carolina, in Buncombe County. You know, when we were all sitting in a class and our class was interrupted about COVID, we didn't know what COVID was. But all of us said that we need to take care of each other and really support each other during this crisis. So I feel good about this because I don't think that we're out of this crisis yet. And because of that, I'm hoping that this would help you understand that the people that you need to be most concerned about is your staff and your fellow law enforcement friends, families, and friends, because those are going to be the people who support you during this crisis. Next slide, please. This is our wonderful center, and I like to show this because when people say jail, this is not a jail. This is a detention center. It's a 3,000 bed detention center, which, believe it or not, 1,100 employees work there. And I love that building because it represents what we're needing to do in rehabilitation and helping criminal justice reform. So in that, I like to show this picture when people say they have a jail. No, I don't have a jail. I have a detention center. But imagine that building is filled with people every day, both civilians and law enforcement. So when you think about a hospital, we're larger than most of the hospitals around the country. And so that is our facility that we have to work in each and every day. Next slide, please. So when you're talking about a crisis, here's what we had to look at. Compensation, recognition, adequate PPE supplies, and safety. Well, everything worked well until you got to the PPE supplies. And do you have enough supplies? And will it last for a length of time? We were unsure because no one came into a crisis like this ever that I can remember, that what would we do if we run out of supplies? So believe it or not, simply my goal was to make sure that my health provider provided the necessary supplies that we have. But I can tell you personally, I was on the phone every day looking for supplies. And I have to tell you, NSA and the Major County Sheriff Association supported me because I heard from them every week, if not every day, on whether we had enough supplies and where we would obtain supplies. But supplies was definitely a problem. Safety was also a problem. You know, we don't believe safety comes into effect because we are in a secure environment, but, you know, leaving doors open, walking around unsure, just concerned about our safety. So because we were so concerned about our safety, we had to come up with protocols for every single thing that we did here at the sheriff's office. Then we talking about recognition. How do you keep your employees motivated? If they're being recognized, how do you do all of that? All of that came about. And of course, the last one, but definitely the most important one, compensation. Overtime and any other funding came in about how do we get funding, if there's any funding out there, and how we obtained it. So everything was what we call a knee-jerk reaction the first couple of weeks because nobody knew where we were going. The nation didn't know what was doing, but we were simply watching this thing evolve across the United States, and we became concerned. Next slide, please. So when we talk about compensation, you know, we looked at whether we can pay our employees, how much we can pay them, and was there an incentive? So believe it or not, there was this incentive called SAD, and you'll see it here, Special Assignment Differential Pay. So we had to look at all of our divisions and agencies working with inside our facility. Do you come in contact with COVID? How often you come in contact with COVID? Are you exposed to COVID? And all of that. So we found the money, or we were given the money, which called SAD pay through our county. Believe it or not, when the police department got it, I said, well, my sheriff's deputies and sheriff staff also need to get it. So if you look at the bottom, unbelievably, from March to September 2020, we have now paid out $829,000 in additional pay, a percentage, I think it was 3 to 5% on top of their annual pay. But believe it or not, I got the numbers. As of today, we have paid out $1,700,000 in payments, which is the SAD pay, to our employees who are working in these environments that they would be more exposed to COVID than the average person. And I know that sounds like a lot, but we believe that if we continue this crisis, we will probably hit $1.5 million, and that's compensation to our employees who are working in these environments. Simply saying, a person working inside of the detention center and the jail arrest processing will come in contact with, exposed more likely than the person who is just out here on the dock area. And so we had to look at that. Everybody didn't get paid for it. Everybody didn't get compensated. And it was a criteria for us to go through it. But I can tell you that my staff was very happy to hear that they're getting 5% more. Next slide, please. And so besides compensation of the SAD pay that was provided, you can see here that the county also gave leave 80 to 86 hours. The federal government, 80 hours. The federal government leave pay also was in there. So all of this is good. And here's something that you have to understand. You have to encourage your employees to come to work and encourage and let them know that you are working for them to compensate them. So because everybody's nervous about coming to work, everybody's nervous about overtime. So it was my job to make sure that my staff and my employees knew that I was working behind the scenes for them and trying to get this compensation. And we came up with protocols and criteria so that people can take off work if they're sick. And, you know, we went with some of the CD guidelines, but of course, my medical provider here also had guidelines. So we listened to those guidelines, and if you're out for an extended period of time, you could implement any one of these at the time during the COVID crisis. Next slide, please. Now, this is my favorite. So what do you do in the middle of a crisis? Well, this is our wonderful patio area that a local church dressed up. So you have to think our employees are here 12 hours, the minimum shifts are 12-hour shifts. So they're here inside of the building. Do you want them to go outside and get exposed to COVID at a restaurant? And believe it or not, like Charlotte, North Carolina at the time, a lot of the city was closed down. So we didn't have the luxury to go to any restaurant. It had to be selected restaurants. A lot of them were closed. And you also must understand, everybody was going through the pandemic. We weren't sure what we were getting. And so we decided to have the lunch catered in and then simply went out into the community. I'm a very much seen person in the community. So all the people that I saw, I went and knocked on their doors and said, hey, if you want to help us, this is how you can help us. Simply provide us some food and lunch. Next slide, please. And this is one of the places that we have in our detention center, and it's the ODR, which is the Officer Dining Hall. So in the middle of this crisis, believe it or not, some of our spouses of our employees did not work. Some of them got laid off. A lot of things happening. So instead of trying to take money out of their pockets so they can pay for lunch, we simply served our employees free meals every day. And if you look at it from the beginning, March 23rd, down to August 25th, 18,000 meals were served. People still brought their lunch. People still had lunch catered in, but we served 18,000 meals and at a cost of $52,000. $52,000 for a happy employee, to me, feeding 18,000 people, I believe was a great deal. But this is how we help the employees to be encouraged to come to work and try to do anything that we can to encourage them to continuously come to work and encourage other people also to come to work. Next slide, please. So going out in the community, if anybody knows me, I'm a very community-oriented person. If there's a parade, there's an event, there's a chili cook-off, any of those things, I would always attend and go out and sometimes help sponsor those events. So when we were going through the crisis, a lot of the restaurants that came to us asked us, what could they do for us? And I simply said, can you feed us? Can you help my men and women eat? You know, instead of bringing lunch, a bag lunch, or having to eat the same thing. And, you know, it's a strain on the family because of income. So we had lunches catered in. 90% of the time, our lunches were catered in. And if you can see in the middle of that ED2, that is laptop donations. We house the state's largest juvenile detention center here, and we just opened this detention center up in December. So it was all new to us also, but simply having people sit at home and try to figure out what to do and keep its businesses up and going, we reached out to this organization and they provided laptops for our juvenile population at the time. But the rest is for us. You know, we asked, they asked us what could they do. Most people brought dinners, most people fed us, and I can tell you the employees and my staff was happy. especially when it was delivered to the door and all we had to do is take it from the door and take it inside. And you can see it wasn't just pizza and chicken wings, it was Firehouse Sub. AT&T even brought us food, and then we went up some scale with some Blackfin high-end restaurant, and it was more than burgers and hot dogs, but we had a great time with that. Next slide, please. And so this is again a church dinner. You can see the patio area was dressed up. We had live music, and here's the sandwiches at the top, and that's the church staff at the bottom dressed in red. So this church, Freedom House Church, provided meals for our staff starting in June to August 20th. What most people did not know, that is my church that I attend, and I'm a greeter. 90% of the people in the church did not know I was the sheriff. They just thought I was somebody greeting at the front door. And then somebody said, that's the sheriff. And the church said, what can we do for you? And I said, just like anybody else, if you could help feed my staff, going out to lunch, because it takes time to go out and the time to come back, or there's time to prepare it, if you can simply bring us lunch. They catered the lunch in, they served us, they dressed the patio there, and they actually played music, which was a very relaxing atmosphere. We don't say inmates, but we say residents. So my residents was listening at the music upstairs and asked us what was going on. And we were simply saying we're having church downstairs, but it was actually on a Saturday afternoon, and we had a great time, and the church provided us food. That church now is going to partnership with us and come inside, and we're going to have services inside the detention center, but that's just a relationship that we built during the time of COVID-19. Next slide, please. And so how do you still encourage your staff? We have this wonderful lady here who is God sent. Ms. Rachel Van Hoy, and she calls me up and says, she would like to do something for the shift coming on in the afternoon, which is dusk dark. So, I'm a big kid at heart, celebrations, anything to make anybody happy. So we actually lined the walkway up from where they park their cars just across the street, all the way to the front door. So when they're walking to work, we have this illuminated walkway with just paper bags and candles. Think about it, just paper bags and candles and a little bit of sand, something simple. But here it is up at the top, you light up the world. And just to encourage our employees who come into work, we recognize you are doing a great job in the middle of a crisis, and we just appreciate you, and we thank you for coming to work. Believe it or not, we also lost, staff members, loved ones in the middle of crisis, and people don't think about that. We lost a lot of people, a lot of husbands passed, a lot of wives passed, and mothers passed, of our employees, and we still had to ask them to come to work, after, a certain amount of time. So just this was encouraging, and imagine rounding that corner and you see your your pathway lit up all the way to the building. And it was a beautiful sight. I can tell you it was a beautiful sight. And we have 2 facilities, and it was done at both facilities. And I think the bottom one is the one at the other facility that we have. Next slide, please. And of course, this is one of the most proudest things that I have and I like to talk about. So of course, if you have 1,500 men and women housed as inmates/residents, people are going to say, well, do you have enough supplies? Do you have enough masks? Do you have this? Do you have gloves? Do you have that? So I simply went around and started taking pictures of the supplies that we have and how many rolls of toilet tissue that we had. And I know that sounds crazy, but when you're telling somebody you got 50,000 rolls of toilet tissue and 300,000 masks and everything, that's significant to someone. The best, proudest part I am is this black drum at the bottom. So somebody says, well, how much of hand sanitizer you have? Well, I have about 6 30-gallon drums of hand sanitizer. So that's one of the drums that we station in all of the facilities and around the entryways for our employees. So simply, if you run out of hand sanitizer, you walk up to this 30-gallon drum and fill your container with our hand sanitizer. But that's one of the proudest things, because people said, how much of hand sanitizer do you have? I said, I have, my first shipment is 6 30-gallon drums of hand sanitizer. So this is something that our employees use very much. We loved it, but the other photos are our warehouses or our places where we stored all the products. And we never ran out of any supplies. We were ordering time after time after time again, and we announced it to the public. One thing I want to mention is that during this time, our wonderful person, Mrs. Van Hoy, our business manager, also was telling everybody what we were doing and everything else. When she went to her dentist that day, the dentist said, well, what do y'all need? What do y'all need? And actually, they sent some thermal thermometers to us free. And so in the middle of a crisis, we got a lot of things free, but we also let our employees know what we were receiving. Next slide, please. And so this is me. So when you're trying to get people to encourage to wear masks, this is what I did just about every Monday. It's called my daily mask. And I think the reason I got a hit on this because people were thinking that it was a daily Catholic mass that I was talking about. So this is a small collection of masks that I have. I think the best one I like is the one with the star, the big star at the top, which was great for me, and I had a great time with it. The one at the bottom with the 846 on, a group of community leaders asked me to march with them during the protests and riots. If nobody's not believing on the rock, we had a protest and riot during the COVID-19 pandemic. So then I simply went out and marched with demonstrators so they won't burn down my city, so they won't tear up my city. And people passed this around and said, our sheriff is connected to us. But, you know, and I got absolutely no flack for wearing that mask, but the 846 mask was pretty good. The rest was people started making masks and sending them to me. But as you can tell that my mask matches my bow tie and my necktie. And believe it or not, my staff got a little jealous. And so they try to step up their game. We did not allow any Dallas Cowboy masks in the building at the time because I'm a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. But even now, I wouldn't even let a Dallas Cowboy mask in. I'm sure everybody knows why. But we had a great time with the masks, and we collected them. And I'm still collecting masks to this day. Next slide, please. And believe it or not, during our screening process, we had a very, very good screening process that every single person who comes into the building each and every day had to be screened. The color of the day now is purple. So here's my band for this morning. I would walk in, get my temperature checked, sign in, what time I'm coming in. They asked me the question, was I exposed? Did I been around anybody with COVID? You know, the general questions. Then I came in. It was extremely important for me to be at the front door, greeting my staff, talking to them as much as I can. And I probably did it for the first couple of months every morning. In the morning at 6 and then stayed in the afternoon, just greeting them, having fun with them, talking about what they're bringing for lunch, then telling them we had their own lunch. Well, let me see your mask. No, you can't wear that mask. Isn't that the same mask you had last week? Just to encourage them, to give them that lighter side. And believe it or not, a couple of days I missed the front door and I was called out. Sheriff, where were you? And I said I was at the other building because I can't leave them out, so I had to go to the other building. But I think it's important that your senior staff is seen at the front door, is seen by the people and greeted. And a lot of my staff, my major's here, he's on here, and I remember seeing him that morning with my captain and my other majors. That is important for your staff to see you, encourage them, just not to salute all the time and just not, you know, showing your stars and bars and eagles. It's just being a human being and asking them how they are and asking them if a lot of my staff lost loved ones. And I personally, if any of my staff members lose a loved one, even to this day, I personally call them and I personally speak with them and give them encouragement and give them the sympathy that they should expect from their sheriff. And that is something I personally do. So if I'm seeing a staff member coming back who just lost a loved one, I'm going to have a personal conversation with that person. And I can tell you that was very much encouraging by a lot of people. People said, I've been here for years and my sheriff has never called me, especially just call me on the phone and just have a great, just candid conversation. Because we all know at funerals, this is when additional cousins show up and additional people show up that probably wasn't your family or close. And we just had a lot of laughter during that time. And, you know, I tell them, if anything I can do so you won't rush back into this pandemic, let me know. But simply allowing your staff to see you every day was very important. Next slide, please. And these are the things that we did. We encouraged, this is some of the simple signs that we have now. We have signage everywhere. We have signage on the floors, simply telling people what they can and cannot do. And believe it or not, that works. When people walk to the door, they have to read the signs. We do a QRC code now, but simply telling people the safety that we have here, we want to continue it. Food services, anybody enter my building, we will still have to take their temperature. And then we have the safe distancing on the floor, the circles on the floor, and people came creative. And, you know, all our signs were uniform, and we make sure that it was in different languages and to give people clear and precise direction. You know, it could be too wordy. We just want to give the facts, look at it, and move on. But we had a great sign campaign, and it went on and on and on. But what was great about it is that we had our temperatures checked 24 hours a day. And so it wasn't like we stopped and start back in the morning. We had it 24 hours a day. I will tell you that we did have an outbreak of about 50 to 60 people, and we announced it to the public. We told them what was going on, but we had a great medical partnership here with our medical provider. None of our residents ever left the facility for treatment. We housed all of our people here. We treated all our people here, and I encourage the staff, look at what we're doing. We're good enough to take care of our own. Nobody was on a ventilator or anything. We took care of our own here because we had followed directions with the safe rules and regulations. Next slide, please. And like we said, and these are some of the things that we kind of candidly have around. You know, we had these hand sanitizers, so we made them and we hand them out. Matter of fact, I just got my additional supply this morning of about 500 of these. And when I'm speaking to people, you know, we handed them out. And my staff encouraged to hand one to someone. And so these are small things that were encouraging, but these were a hit. Everybody wanted one. My wife probably has about 15 at the house. When you're talking to other sheriffs, you would just give them one, and you're representing your agency. And, you know, if you're a sheriff, you know, you have to make sure that your agency is the best agency, and you make sure that you have the brightest star and the brightest coins. But so simply, when I show these to other sheriffs, you know, anybody can give you a hand sanitizer with another company on it, but then they had my personal hand sanitizers there, and we encouraged people to give those out, and they did, and it became a hit. And I think that's why I have 500 more of them today. Next slide, please. So this is it. You know, we encourage our staff, but the biggest thing is being engaged with your staff. You know, I serve lunch. I put an apron on and I serve lunch. When my staff was inside the break room, some days I would just go there and actually take their trays up and take this up. And that's unusual for a sheriff, but that's what I did. We had the conversation about the football season coming on. I went inside the kitchen because most people don't realize this. We have to feed 1,500 people 3 times a day. So I went inside the kitchen. You know, I can't serve the potatoes as quick as the guys on the line, but I can pick up the bread and put it on there, pick up the spoons, and they push me out of line. But, you know, they high five. Sheriff, when are you coming back? Well, you can't come in here with a suit. You need to get this and that. Simply providing some of my staff and the resident socks, just socks, you know, made a hit. You know, like, Sheriff, you know, we need rubber boots, but our feet are sliding around. I went out, brought a whole bag of Nike socks, came back in, engaged with them. And what I believe that worked, it wasn't just something that I did for a show. It was something that I actually love to do, is to interact with my staff. My staff will tell you, I walk this building every day, greeting people, someplace where I probably won't be. And my staff, well, how did you know that? Well, I was in the building and I talked to someone. I know that the laundry room needed this many employees. And you encourage them. You go to the laundry room, and if you're sitting there just folding some pants a couple of days with your guys and saying, well, why don't y'all use Tide? Why are y'all using that? And this is an industrial strength. And you laugh, take some things out of the dryer, you know, turn off a machine. You know, if somebody's pushing a cart down the hall, push it with them. You know, you shouldn't be above doing anything as a sheriff. And I know that may sound crazy. And, you know, if sheriffs are listening, it may be not for you, but it's definitely for me. You know, that's what I would love to continue to do. Things that I continue to do. If you are working the road during the Thanksgiving and Christmas holiday, because we will probably still be in this pandemic, Last year and the year before, I fed every deputy at my home personally on Thanksgiving Day and Christmas because they're working, but they came by the sheriff's house to get a hot meal, sit at my table, you know, ate in the living room, ate in the dining room, ate upstairs, and they sat and ate. And I think that was a very good move, and we're going to do it again this year. So in Mecklenburg, if you're working Thanksgiving or Christmas, you know, we alternate because I go to my in-laws. So whichever holiday that I'm here, all of the road deputies eat at my house. And I can tell you, that's building camaraderie and that's building great partnership. So when I asked you guys to do these tasks during this COVID-19, it was simply, Sheriff, yeah, but you know, when I come over to the house for Thanksgiving, I need an extra slice of pound cake or something. And you just kind of laugh. We even had people bringing desserts to us. I had a lady 2 weeks ago who just began to walk again in the last 2 or 3 months. She never could walk because of a medical problem. She heard about us and she came and made 6 pound cakes for us and dropped them off. Now I'm on keto diet, so I can't eat any, but I can tell you that she's going to bake me one next week because I'm going to be off a keto diet. And so my employees got fresh, hot pound cake from a little old lady. And we all know the little old ladies make the best pound cake. And so she came in, hugged us, and we invited them in. And you know, she and her husband left in tears because she said she felt love. And that's what we're doing. I think that's it.
Thank you. That was such a wonderful presentation. I also want to thank the COPS office, IACP, and our CRI-TAC partnership who made this webinar possible. The recording of this webinar will be posted on our website. Again, we don't have time for live questions today, so please feel free to email me at kbarksdale@sheriffs.org, and I'll be sure that Sheriff McFadden gets your questions. Also, please visit the collaborativereform.org for more information on how to request free training and technical assistance through our CRI-TAC program. Thank you all for your time today and have a great day.